Welcome to episode 5 of the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Benko, and in this episode titled Guided by Leadership, Mentorship's Impact on Personal Professional Growth, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Lucas talks about his 27 years of service in the U.S. Army, all mostly in special operations and in special forces, the Green Berets, and how he has adapted and evolved into the incredible leader he is today. He is the current commander of 4th Battalion of the 1st Special Warfare Training Group at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. He has an amazing story and journey to share. Thanks for tuning in to the Acknowledge to Action podcast, where we embrace the journey. Dave, thank you so much for being here on the Acknowledge to Action podcast. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We met, earlier this week to go over what this conversation we're going to have, but I'm really looking forward to having this really meaningful conversation and hearing your journey here today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
Well, I always kick the show off with the first season is really highlighting our service members and folks in the military. You have an amazing military career, and I'm really excited to hear more. And I know our audience is as well. Can you take us through your military journey from the moment you became involved with the military to where you are today, highlighting key moments, challenges, and transformations along the way?
Well, given that we've given ourselves about an hour, I'll keep it as quickly as possible. But so I actually grew up in a military family. I'm not a military brat, but the military was always a very heavy presence around. Both my grandfathers served in World War II. My father was a Vietnam veteran, West Point graduate, and so it was always present, but I was never actually encouraged to join. And so it was just something that my dad told me later. He said, I wanted you to make up your own mind, not be pushed into it, because it's not something that you should be pushed into. And so bottom line, I always grew up around it. I always had the greatest respect for the members of my family and just some of the stories that I heard from them and from other people. And I think at an early age, I realized that the military is full of great people. And so it just was always something that was out there. And so bottom line is that after I graduated from high school, I enlisted. And so I enlisted. My father had been in special forces, was a ranger and infantryman in Vietnam. I did not think I was tough enough to go into the Rangers just because of everything that I heard about it. But once I got to basic training and jump school, I found I enjoyed it, and I was doing decently well at it. And so I actually got a Ranger contract and gave it a go as a young private and was successful. After that, I actually got out of the Army in January of 2000. So obviously before the war, and I wanted to go to college. So I did. I realized that I missed people and the people that I'd served with. So I joined 20th Special Forces Group while I was in college as a young NCO, and then did their program. Actually went to Special Forces selection the first time as a young E5. Shortly thereafter, I was asked to become a detachment commander, and which I did not want to do. I did not want to be an officer, which is funny now as a senior lieutenant colonel. It's a good source of laugh. But I finally accepted, joined ROTC at Florida State University, and about a week to 10 days later, after I signed my contract, September 11th happened. Obviously, a very pivotal moment in our generation's lives. Wow. And so I revoked my reserve contract, which I had to go into the Guard because I wanted to be a part of everything that was going to go on. And none of us knew what was going to happen or where it was going to lead, but I knew that was something that I had to be a part of it. So I commissioned in 2003 into the artillery, ended up branch transferring after a few years into infantry, and subsequently left the infantry, even though I love it, over and went into special forces. And so I've been doing that since I graduated in 2009, and now I am a battalion commander. And so it's been a long road, but full of the greatest people in the world, more more adventure than I could ever ask for, and things that I never saw coming. But it's been a heck of a lot of fun.
Wow. Hearing that, so you went in as a young private, you went in the enlisted route, rose to the ranks of NCO E5. Is it sergeant or is that staff sergeant in the Army?
Sergeant.
Oh, sergeant. Okay. And then you got out in 2000. And then decided to get. Did you go into the reserves or the guard? If I'm hearing that right, when you decided to get back in?
I went into the guard. I was actually a corporal when I got out, and then I got promoted while I was in the guard, and was a buck sergeant in E5 in 20th Special Forces Group down there, and it's part of the Florida National Guard. So I did that while I went to college. So some guys were out having a great time on some of the weekends, which I certainly did. But also I spent some time out with the teams and training and jumping and doing all that sort of stuff. So it was a great way to kind of bridge that gap while I was in college, and it was a heck of a lot of fun. I'm still friends with some of those folks today, and 20 some odd years later. So great opportunity.
Oh wow. I'm still reflecting on and we just got a microcosm of your amazing story so far. I'd like to go back to how you decided at some point I'm going to go into the Army, right? And then you had reservations about pursuing Ranger because of their reputation, right? Can you speak to how you acknowledge, like, that self-acknowledgement, like, it sounds like you got a little bit of that confidence boost and that foundation from basic training and maybe some AIT. But can you speak to a little bit more, because my understanding, can you talk about, like, how that path was? Because you mentioned a Ranger contract. I think our audience would like to hear more about that, and how you, as a young man, you were able to acknowledge that and identify that and then go be successful with it.
Absolutely. So there's what's known as the Option 40 contract that you can enlist with right off the street, and that gives you the opportunity to go to jump school, and then if successful there, go to the Ranger Selection Program, which is called RAS, for the 75th Ranger Regiment. My father and his classmates and all Vietnam veterans, I had heard multiple times that after Ranger School, Vietnam was easy. There's a certain jest to that, but that was the refrain that I heard and growing up, and so I was like, I don't know, if I can swing that quite yet, and so, but once I got in and like you said, built that confidence, really enjoyed as much as you can enjoy basic training in the Army. Just doing the job was it was something that I kind of took to more than I anticipated, and so once I graduated, while I was in jump school, I was able to secure a slot to go to the selection process for the Ranger Regiment, and then it was definitely the hardest thing I had done to that point, but a great experience, and once I was done with that, then I moved on to the actual battalion, which was the first Ranger Battalion out of Savannah, Georgia. Coincidentally, just celebrated their 50th anniversary, so happy birthday to First Battalion. But why I did it, I guess to the crux of your question, why not? And that was the sort of thing that and that was kind of the beginning of what became kind of my mantra within my career is why not? There's nothing special about me, but watching all these other people do it, I said, well, the worst that happens is I am not successful and I end up right back where I am. So why not give it a shot? Because if I am successful, then great, then off to a new adventure. And so that was what happened, and it was the start of a love affair, which is now 27 years and counting, and it's been a great time.
Wow,
no regrets.
Wow, just the you being able to, I just, me personally, I find it very motivating and intriguing when you have those moments where you're able to identify, like for you, as you said, why not? And that was an incredible sort of motivation for you to get through. I would imagine arguably one of the biggest challenges of your life to date, right? Because of the standards and the expectations of the training, and how you harness that to meet those objectives. both personally, professionally within the Army. What can you talk about some of the other key moments and challenges and transformations, because that's such a critical part. I don't want to generalize here, but a lot of our young men and women go into the military at a young age, and they're just identifying things about themselves personally, but they're also in a very y- you know empowered environment to be challenged in a lot of good ways. Can you talk a little bit about some of those key moments and challenges that have helped you build off of that baseline confidence that you had through basic training all the way through, you becoming a ranger?
Absolutely. And I would say for anybody considering a career within the military, or even just thinking about it, if you want to challenge yourself, it's the right environment to do that. And it's just like exercising, right? If you don't exercise your muscles, they atrophy. And if you don't exercise resilience and grit and build that up, then it atrophies. And so there's it's you gain confidence by going and doing hard things, whether it's hard physically, whether it's hard mentally, earning a degree or whatever it is. But doing something that takes effort that's where growth lives, on the other side of effort. And so as you're looking at that, and you're looking at a place where you can challenge yourself, I personally have found that the military is a great option to do that. And something I tell all of my the officers, and particularly as I counsel them and talk with them and advise them on their careers, which they have so much in front of them. It's your career. If you don't manage it, somebody else will. And so go out there, find the things that you want to do, and go pursue those. If you're successful, great. If you're not successful, not great, but the likelihood of you being better on the other side of that are exponentially higher than you being worse off. And so nobody ever lost their career out of trying something great. But I just don't want to look back with regret on something and say, well, I should have tried that. And that's not germane to the military. I think it applies across all facets of life and in any job. It's just go do it and give it a shot. If you fail, great. You're going to learn something. You'll be better, and maybe you try it again, and then you're successful the second time. In fact, the first time I went to Special Forces selection as a young E5, I was actually medically dropped right at the very end, and my heart was broken. They said, "Hey, you can come back," but I was unsuccessful that time. It was after I returned from that where I was asked to receive my commission and come back to be a detachment commander, which I as I said, I didn't want to do. I wanted to stay as an NCO, but I relented and said, "Okay, I'll do it." Obviously, it took. Here I am, and I've had a great time along the way. But it wasn't for, I'd say that was in 2001, and I went back to selection in early 2008. So 7 years later, I went back, and that time as a captain, and was successful.
Oh, wow.
Was successful that time. So it may come later, but if you give it another shot, you never know. And it wasn't anything that I could control. I'd gotten very, very sick, and which happens, and people fail all the time. We've only got about a 30% selection rate out there at the selection course. So it's definitely something that when you do it and accomplish it, it's something to be proud of, even if you don't go any further than that, just because so many people try and fail. I am one of them, but I went back, and here I am.
Yeah. Well, it definitely speaks to your resiliency, which I know that word gets used a lot across the board, but it really means a lot to I believe to military members, because of whether going through Special Forces selection and going those stories, just from what I hear, is not that uncommon, where it's a round 2, even round 3, right? Just to keep that perseverance and that resilience to meet that objective. Can you talk about, so Special Forces is my understanding of it. It's a fairly, in the context of the Army, is a pretty large umbrella, right? There's a lot that falls under the Special Forces command, if you will. Can you speak a little bit about that transition, because from Rangers, because I think generally speaking, people have a general idea of Rangers. Just they're coming for you. It's a very trained, highly regimented unit. But then how does special forces differ from the Rangers, and what was that transition like for you?
So they are dramatically different. So the umbrella term that you're thinking of is actually
Okay.
special operations. So the U.S. Army's
Okay.
Operations Command, that encompasses organizations like the Special Forces Regiment, otherwise known as Green Berets, the Rangers, Special Operations Aviation, and Civil Affairs.
That's what I was thinking. Okay.
And so I've actually spent almost my entire career within special operations, which has been fantastic. I did do one glorious year in the 10th Mountain Division in Baghdad. I spent a year there in the very early stages of the war, which was a foundational experience and great. But for the differences between the Rangers, you are correct. The Rangers are, in the most simple terms, the finest light infantry force in the world. They are an organization that has very high standards and enforces those standards the same for the regimental commander, all the way down to the very newest private that comes in. And so it is a unique organization that is just fantastic. I have nothing but great things to say about the organization. Special Forces has a very, very different it is a very different organization. So the central piece and the center of gravity within Special Forces is known as the Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha, otherwise known as the A Team. That is a 12-person team that has a variety of job specialties on it, that is designed, equipped, and organized with our primary mission is to conduct unconventional warfare. And so a good example of that is after 9/11, the soldiers that rode in on horseback working with the Northern Alliance were from 5th Special Forces Group, and then doing the same, coming in working with the Iraqis to oust ISIS from Iraq and Syria, working with the locals and doing that. And that's the gist. That's the genesis of what you do in Special Forces is you work with host nation, host nation forces, whether it's partisans, whether it's guerrillas, or whether it's a standing army. You work with those forces to oust an occupying power like ISIS or a hostile nation. You can look at when we worked with the Kurds to overthrow Saddam Hussein and his government. So there's multiple examples over the recent years, but at the end of the day, very different organizations. Both are very highly trained. They have very different missions as their primary missions and how their tasks are organized. But just full of all the adventure you can handle in either organization if you want to give it a shot.
Oh wow. Are to highlight what you just spoke to? Are the Green Berets responsible for what you just described? Is that what falls under the Special Forces?
Yeah. So yes. So they work with. They were the ones that all the famous photos of the soldiers riding in on horseback in Afghanistan. Those were members of 5th Special Forces Group. In fact, those photos were from the battalion that I was very fortunate to be a part of in command up until last year, 3rd Battalion.
Oh, wow.
And so a lot of history there, and yeah, fantastic organization. But again, working with locals and working within the culture, everybody gets language training, everybody gets cultural training, and then of course your military specialties as well. So just a very different mission, but a heck of a lot of fun.
I would imagine the training and education is pretty involved before you become operational. How long from the time you get selected and you pass that baseline test? Hopefully I'm using the right language, but that baseline evaluation. How long from that point to where you're on a team or you're operational?
to go through the Special Forces Qualification course, otherwise known as the Q course, it takes anywhere between 1 to 2 years, depending on your specialty and your language.
Wow. Okay.
So you are correct. Everybody goes through very similar training. It's broken down into different phases where after you are selected, you'll go through small unit training, small unit tactics, which is where you learn how to operate out in the woods, just doing basic infantry skills. Because we bring people in right off the street that don't have any experience at all other than basic training. We bring people from all over the Army, no matter what their MOS is. If they try out, they can join Special Forces, and so they may or may not have that tactical background that say an infantryman will. So after that, you'll go through your job course where you learn your specialty or your MOS, military occupation specialty. So you can go through any one of 5 baseline skill sets, which is the officers, 18 alphas, where they learn heavily on planning, special operations, and unconventional warfare, and how to set that up. You have 18 bravos, which are weapons specialists. So they handle everything from light to heavy weapons and the employment. They're the tacticians on the team. You've got your 18 Charlies, which are your demolitions / engineers. So they can build a bridge and then they can destroy it. So great guys to have around. You've got your 18 Deltas, which are your medics, which are the most highly trained medics in the military. They're just the medical course alone is almost a year long, and so they learn everything from battlefield trauma to dentistry to veterinary care, so that we can go into a location and they come out. They have to be able to sustain a casualty with what they carry for days on end with just their skill set. So very, very highly trained medics. And then lastly, you have your 18 Echoes, which are your communication specialists who go through all sorts of radio training on how to on different radio sets and because we have to be able to talk to people. So those are the 5 base levels that everybody will go through one of those 5 courses.
That's interesting. I never heard it broken down like that. You think Special Forces is on across the board, like, okay, I'm Special Forces now, but having those specialties is really interesting because I could see how that could, if somebody's interested in becoming a medic, but having the most amazing training you could possibly have, not only become a medic, but you become Special Forces, that could be a means to somebody acknowledging and identifying like this is an amazing opportunity. I had a general idea because there's a lot of great leadership books out there and breakdowns of that, but hearing it firsthand is you can't beat that in a moment like this on a podcast. Going back to something you said earlier and it sounds like when you tried it for Special Forces and then you went for round 2, it sounds like that the opportunity was based off situation, preparation, and opportunity. As far as I believe, was it 2008? Am I accurate?
That's right. That's right.
Reflecting on that year, you said. Okay. Is that accurate? Again, I'm just sharing some of my own personal thoughts to this. I believe that's opportunity. Something like that is just based off the context of a situation, and you were obviously prepared from your previous experience. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I was not as physically prepared as I should have been. I was coming off of my 3rd deployment to Iraq, coincidentally with the Rangers, and I went to a captain's course. And while I was in that course, I actually had no plans because I had already branch transferred to back to the infantry, and so my plan was to go out and do that. I actually had a job offer by my former battalion commander to come back and command a company in his brigade that was getting ready to head out to Afghanistan. And my thoughts on it were at the time, I said, well, if I'm going to go work with locals, which a lot of people did, I said I want to work with the people that do it professionally, which is Special Forces. And I had a friend of mine who called me that I had served with for many years at that point, and he said, hey, they are taking Special Forces is taking out of year group waivers. Because, as you know, the surge was going on within Iraq, Afghanistan as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So I called the Special Forces rep. He pulled up my records and he said, "I'll never forget this." He goes, "Yeah, we'll take you. When do you want to go to selection?" So I told him, and that was how I applied. So I never actually filled out an application,
Wow.
but it worked out. So, they were looking for folks at that time, and just with everything going on, units were doing 15-month deployments at that point, and I just wanted to do something a little bit different, and so I embarked down that trail. And my goal was to get. I had done 3 trips to Iraq at that point. By 2007, I wanted to get over to Afghanistan, kind of where the whole war started, and I was unsuccessful. I went back and continued to head back to Iraq again and again, and so I never actually made it over to Afghanistan, but I spent a good deal of time over in Iraq and then Syria later on. So.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Before we transition into the leadership piece of today's focus point, I'd like to ask you, in your current role as the Battalion Commander of the 1st Special Warfare Training Group, what guidance and advice do you have for anyone interested in pursuing the path of Special Forces? And I referenced this in previous episodes. I look at MEP, MEPS is Military Engineering Processing Station. MEPS to me is taking on a new approach, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. I believe, just from my own, training as a C-130 loadmaster, that it regardless of what you do in the military, it requires all 4 of those components, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. What can you say as far as what can somebody do to prepare themselves for those challenges that they're going to experience and encounter?
Absolutely. Something every once in a while I'll run into somebody, on post and who asks me a question. They'll see me in my rank and we end up chatting. And I always love talking with young soldiers and, and just like this podcast, right? Like always be recruiting and trying to get the right folks in. And so, cause we need great people. And so what I tell every one of them is, hey, just try, give it a shot. You've got to prepare. So specific, to the MEPS acronym, mentally, you've got to be ready. And the best way to be ready and have that confidence in yourself is knowing that you have done everything you can to prepare. And then once you get there, you don't self-select, which means you don't quit. Because you don't know the standards. You don't know if you passed or not. Just do the best that you can while you're there. Emotionally, again, it's okay. You have to be ready for challenges. You have to be ready to be, cold, wet, tired, hungry, frustrated, all the things that can cause somebody to quit, and just accept that. And for me, the best way that I kind of deal with that is I look around and I say, well, I'm not any more miserable than anybody else. And there's always somebody else that you can look at that's probably a little bit more uncomfortable than you. So that may not be right, but at the end of the day, it's, you go, well, I don't have it that bad. And so, and then physically, obviously you have to physically prepare. It's very physically demanding, and that's not something that you can make up for when you get there. You can't cram that. It takes consistent preparation over time to prepare physically. And then spiritually, it's that kind of wraps all of that into one, right? And that means different things to different people. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, just know that, for me, it's I know that I serve because I enjoy serving, because I enjoy serving a cause greater than myself. And that this is just an extension of that. It's not better than serving anywhere else in the military. It's just different. And so it's a place that I found my home in, and that I have found opportunities. I found joy and real fulfillment, both personally and professionally and spiritually, as time has gone on. So, that would be my best advice.
Well, that's great. Because like we talked about, excuse me. I think that's an important approach to regards of whatever MOS, in the Air Force, AFSC, we have to, I believe, go in with that mindset to just, because we could be like physically super dialed in, but we may be lacking in the emotional part, and that could throw the balance off. And so hearing that is great. Always kind of sounds like you always constantly have to calibrate yourself. and say, all right, where am I at in the moment? If I'm beat down physically, okay, the emotional part or the mental resilience will kick in, vice versa. I imagine that would apply to operational standards too. And I could speak from a C-130 loadmaster. Like some days you just beat down, you're exhausted, but then you have the mental resilience coming. Like, got to complete the mission, got to see this through. And I'm part of a team, and there's a lot of individuals relying on me to meet that objective.
Absolutely. And one additional point, I think that your body will give out far before your mind will. And so, but I've seen a lot of people that if you have that grit and you have that the can do attitude and going towards it, it's not always easy. I mean, trust me. I quit every day. I just never said it out loud. And to say, hey, I'll quit tomorrow. Because it's very, very physically demanding, and but I've seen going through various courses over the years, people that were very physically fit that you wouldn't that you think would have no problem doing some of the things, and they were the first to quit. Where then you see the person that you wouldn't think is there, but they've got it mentally and they've got the heart, and they continue on. Now, obviously, they have a base level of fitness. You have to, but at the end of the day, it's more about what's in your head and what's in your heart than it is about physically. I mean, I'm no physical specimen. I'm generally one of the smaller guys on a team or in a room, frankly, and at 5'9", 175 pounds. But that doesn't matter if as long as you show up and continue on. It's not made of Superman. It's just people that prepare and then have the heart to stick to it. And so anybody can do it if they put in the work, but some have to put in more than others. Absolutely. But that's okay. But at the end of the day, it's open to everybody, and you just have to prepare, and then you have to be prepared to stick with it through some very trying times.
That's great, and that's a perfect segue into the focus topic of this episode's guided by leadership, right? And so I'll open it up because that's such a great and motivating way, because if somebody's maybe questioning their own personal integrity and hear something like that could be all they need to hear to get them to that finish line, to that, and then on one finish line, then on to the next set of goals and whatnot. So how has leadership and mentorship shaped your military journey and beyond?
Oh, in one word, totally. I've been so fortunate to observe and be the recipient of great leadership from the very first time that I came into the Army and got to my unit. And I'll use, I think back to my time as a young private and as a young a junior NCO. The people looking back now, I had in my time in when I was stationed at 1st Ranger Battalion, 2 of my platoon leaders are now general officers. My company commander is now a general officer. My battalion commander was retired 4-star General Votel. My regimental commander was then Colonel Stanley McChrystal. So the level of leadership that I had from my lieutenant's platoon leader up to the colonel are people that have continued on, and that's just on the officer side. The NCO side is equally as impressive, and so just being around that all of the time and having the high standards, you just can't help but take some of that in, even if you don't want to. And so I failed often as a young soldier, but hopefully people would say that I kind of course corrected as I got older, especially after getting commissioned, because it's a different style. But I've been so fortunate that I can distinctly remember the very, very few poor leaders that I've had over the years, and it's 2 or 3 people, and they stick out only because of the sea of fantastic leadership that I've had over the years. But that's that's also very helpful, because while it may not be fun to go through it at the time, you learn something from everybody. Obviously, you learn from the great leaders, but you also learn from the poor leaders. And, I, as a battalion commander, there are some things that I very specifically did because I didn't see them done in the past. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't leave those gaps for other people. And so it's my best example of learning from what I assessed was poor leadership at the time.
Wow. It's really interesting how you identified. We can learn what not to do from poor examples of poor leadership. I don't want to say equally. I guess I just technically did, but we could learn just as much from what not to do, just as much as what we need to do from the great inspiring leadership. And it's very interesting how you said whether we're aware of it or not, or we're absorbing it or actively processing it, it it, it influences us, whether in the immediate future or the foreseeable future or down the road. I think that's pretty interesting and something to keep in mind. Our listeners to keep in mind, like to reflect on some of those experiences and how it could be applicable to their current situation.
Well, it goes back to what a lot of parents tell their children, right? Mine certainly did, which is you are who you hang out with. And that has, as a teenager, you roll your eyes and you say, yeah, sure. But then as you get older, hopefully you learn that is the absolute truth. And so not by design at first, for sure. I fell into it and I lucked into it. But I have been able to surround myself with just phenomenal people, phenomenal leaders, far better than I, who have elevated my game across the board, personally and professionally throughout my entire career. And so, when I look back, there are people that I still work with that I've been working with for almost 3 decades, that I have the utmost respect for. And, to have them in my life and, not even on a daily basis, but somebody that is there, that provides that continual inspiration is a great thing. And so, for people that don't have that, you can find it. You can build the environment that you want. You just have to be deliberate about it. And like I said, I was not at first. It wasn't something that I was seeking. But once I came back in, it was absolutely something that I recognized. And it took me actually getting out of the Army at first when I ETS'd or got out the first time. I did not plan on coming back in. That was January of 2000. I was a straight civilian. I was a Ranger fire team leader on Friday, and I was in English 101 at community college back in Knoxville, Tennessee on Monday. So it was a rapid transition, and and I just kind of looked around, and after a while, I reconnected with some old friends from high school and whatnot, and they're great guys, but I just missed the camaraderie that I had, and so that's I began to seek out, like, how can I do that, which led me down the path which we already discussed. So.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up your time in the National Guard, because we could talk for hours on end on that, how to manage that, and that's a majority of my career is in the Air National Guard. So I hear what you're saying as far as drill weekends, regularly scheduled drills. You're in the zone. You said you're a squad leader, fire team squad leader, NCO, and then you're in English 101, like with. That transition, talk about rapid. But that's also the essence of this podcast as well. So thanks for sharing that, because that's really interesting. You had that experience and how your experiences drew you back to what you wanted to do. And here you are 27 years later, still doing it strong. That's pretty encouraging and motivating.
It wasn't by design. I lucked into it, but
yeah.
The best way to realize what you've got is to have it taken away. And that's what happened. And I see that. I speak with a lot of guys that or people that do, whether they get out or whether they retire, however they leave, because we all leave at some point. And I think that is the part that people miss the most is being around like-minded folks and whatnot. And so it is very important. And so that's something important to look for as people are transitioning out, whether they're retiring or just getting out. I can confidently say that, even though I haven't retired at this point, nor am I retiring now, but I have gotten out. And so I did go through that process once, and it just didn't take the first time, but probably will the second time.
Yeah. Well, but just having that awareness piece, because of the experience. Experience arguably is our most influential experience. Well, yeah, not a play on words there, but it is our most influential our ability to process things, right? Reflecting on our previous experience. You kind of touched upon it a little bit, but can you share a mentorship experience that significantly influenced your path to where you are today?
Sure. I had, and he doesn't know it, but I had a company commander who, when I was a young ranger many years ago, wrote a personal letter when he left out of command to every member of the company. And I remember, and it wasn't, hey, best of luck. It was a personalized letter to each individual. And I remember receiving that and thinking it made a profound impact on me that, 25 years later, I still remember that moment, and it meant a lot. Now, being the 20-year-old at the time, I wasn't as good at keeping things, so I wish I had that letter still, but it did make an impact. And that was a great example of personalized leadership and that really made an impact on me for sure.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really cool to hear, because that's not in a leadership book 101. Maybe it is in a leadership book maybe that I haven't referenced, but that those little things mean a heck of a lot. Thoughtful, and they're incredibly impactful. Wow, that's thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and something, it was a piece of advice that I got from numerous people, but that I have found to be so true over the years, is that, something small from you as a leader can mean so much to somebody else within your organization. And it was really, I'll give you an example. Recently, I had a young specialist that went to his promotion board, and he had helped with something the previous week. I swung by his NCO's office, and I just said, "Hey, he did a great job last week, and tell him congratulations on the board for me when you see him, and send him by my office so I can congratulate him." And she told me, she said, "Hey, he came back last week and said, hey, the battalion commander told me I did a great job at the previous week, and he was excited about that." For me, it was an offhand comment to one of my soldiers that I meant it, obviously, but to him, it meant enough that he went back and relayed it to his NCO. And so that, it's just continual reinforcement that leadership is a people business. And, if you're sitting back and far removed, especially in this digital age, you can get away with that if that's it, but it probably won't be as effective more times than not. So the more you get out there and interact with your people, you learn where the problems are, you learn where the solutions are, you learn how to better run your organization. And I understand that, to do that at scale it can get difficult, right? But that's where culture comes in, and building that culture from the top down and the bottom up is setting that culture to where you can't be everywhere, obviously, but you set the tone and encourage that from the people that can be out there. And so, that's something that I very purposely try to do nowadays. And as I've gone higher up, it's a lot easier to have that personal leadership style when you're on a 12-man team than it is when you have a 600 person battalion or element that you're in charge of. And so, but it's been great. And, over the years, and kind of continually learning on how to transition from that personal style leadership into more organizational style, and make an organization run the way that you can a smaller team it's a different skill set, and it takes a lot of learning and practice. And I certainly don't have the market cornered on that, but it's something that I've really enjoyed practicing over the years.
What advice do you have for current and future leaders?
Well, I'll go back to the tenet of what I just said is, it is, no matter how large your organization, it's still made up of people, and people are what make your organization go. Whether it's Amazon or whether it's the Army, it doesn't matter. It's made up of people who have great ideas. They have lives. They have an infinite number of circumstances that affect those things. And so if you can build that culture around, no matter whatever you're responsible for, whether it's one person or 10,000, if you build that culture, then and be very deliberate about it. Learn from those that you respect, that you think are good leaders. And as we talked about, also learn from people that you don't consider good leaders. And obviously that's a subjective opinion, but there are generally some things I think we can all agree is not good leadership. And so, if you learn to avoid those, if you do nothing else but don't do some of those things, then you're probably operating in the black at that point, and then you can build on it from there. And most people don't need Napoleon leading the charge, but they do need somebody out there helping them and showing them and being able to provide that vision of moving forward. And then, hey, here's how we do that, and then empowerment to allow people to create that vision as the leader. So.
Wow, I there's just so much as I'm listening to this. There's so many good things to unpack here, and it's gonna take me a few days. But there's so much value in what you're saying, because what I'm hearing is find that style that works for you, but be in the moment with be a people person and meet yourself where you're at as a leader. But when you do that, that helps you meet those individuals where they're at. To empower them, to equip them, to give them the access points that they need to be held accountable in the best way possible. Because I think at the end of the day, I can't speak for everybody, but I think at the end of the day, we want to feel good about ourselves. We want those, how you talk to your soldier. We like hearing those attaboys and those acknowledgments, and to the messenger, it's like, wow, it's just, this is what I do, right? But to the receiver, it means a lot. And I believe that puts tools in the individual's toolbox, to go back to what you said earlier, so they could find ways to manage their career and even beyond their life, instead of it managing them, which I think is just a really important acknowledgement piece that I think is important, that I would hope all could have that, identify that.
Absolutely. And one other thing that I would add to that is give yourself some grace. Everybody's making it up as they go along. Imposter syndrome is very real. And there was a time, this is my second battalion command, but it doesn't matter that I did it before, because I hadn't done it in this situation. And so it was different. And so I was still nervous coming in, and because it was a new organization, I didn't know a lot of the people there, and so it's, even though I was selected to be there and as the commander, you're still, I think everybody's nervous going into new situations, and that's okay, and that's totally fine. And nobody has done, in most circumstances within the military speaking, most people, because you're continually moving up and moving to different jobs, most people haven't done that exact job that they're doing right now. So everybody's learning at the same time. Obviously, you have people with more experience to draw from that may make the transition a little bit easier into a new role. But at the end of the day, they're still learning. And, particularly on the officer side, you are constantly rotating every 1 to 2 years. If you're lucky, you might get 3 years in a job, but your typical command within the military is a 2-year stint. So if people think that somebody's coming in, or if you think that you're coming in and you've got it all figured out and you've got all the answers, I will humbly disagree and say, acknowledge that you don't know everything, and that the organization was there before you and will exist after you. And so, but also give yourself some grace that, hey, okay, I don't know it all. That's fine. You probably have a whole lot of subject matter experts that can fill in those gaps for you. And that's what I found, is just relying on my people. Overall, I have never been disappointed. Sure, there have been, people have made mistakes and whatnot, but that's the egregious mistakes are few and far between. And so if you rely on your people and allow them to do their job, they want to succeed as much as you do. And so I've just never been let down by trusting my people. And it's been, not that doesn't happen, but I've just been very, very fortunate. And it goes back to very purposely surrounding myself with the best people that I know out there, and they haven't let me down yet. So it's made it a lot of fun.
That's great. And how I hear what you just said is, when you trust your people, you're in essence trusting yourself, because it's a reflection of you as a leader. I believe a leader, when they trust their people, they know they could say to themselves, I've done my best, I've given it my all, and I trust them. And that's incredibly empowering and encouraging when you're in a culture like that. So that's really great. I appreciate you sharing your insights with the leadership, because it's such a vast, it's far from a tight knit vacuum. I mean, there's so many, like you said, a lot of times we figure it out as we go along, but reflecting, we empower ourselves. Like, I don't know it all. That's incredibly humbling, but empowering at the same time, because I believe it's going to set you up for learning, to be in the moment.
Absolutely. And, you and I met on LinkedIn, and I'm connected with enough folks that I've served with over the years, and particularly in my commands. And so I'll expect them to call me out if that's not if what I'm saying doesn't match. But I'm fairly confident that the trust, it just really helps build a team, and you'll get far more accomplished. If everything's having to be run through you as a single point of failure, then you're going to fail. Whereas if you just fully empower your folks, then they'll perform, because they want to be successful too. You're not the only one.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's great. I'm like I said, this is such a great conversation we're having, and focusing on leadership, hearing your journey, hearing how you've evolved into this amazing leader, and how you demonstrate that. And I really appreciate that time and feedback. And I can only imagine for all those who are listening as well. There's a lot of great takeaway in this. I'd like to ask you, we kind of wrap things up here. How do you envision incorporating the principles of acknowledge, accept, action? Well, I'll say the acknowledge to action process in your journey moving forward. And what message would you like to share with our listeners as they navigate their own paths, both within and beyond the military, or wherever they may be on their journey?
Well, so first one, the acknowledge to action process, right? I think it comes with, it encapsulates everything that we've talked about this morning, which is acknowledging that there is an issue, acknowledging that you may not have the solution, but then transitioning into a deliberate plan of action that comes from it. You can throw up your hands and say, well, there's nothing I can do about it, but that's generally not true. And I was always taught from the time I was very young. I had a fantastic NCO that as a platoon sergeant, who his mantra was do something, no matter what it is. If you're sitting there and you're not doing anything, we're out on patrol, full security, do something at all times, and always contribute. And so that's obviously stuck with me over the years of just action over everything. I think sometimes people can get wrapped up in the paralysis of analysis, and you need everything to be perfect. But I am much more comfortable that that's not the way I'm wired. It's move out, get the 60% plan, move out, and then adjust as necessary from there. And that's the way I'm comfortable. It may not be. It's definitely not the way that some people like to operate. But for me, that's been the most successful way. Is like you said, identify, acknowledge that there's a problem, and then come up with that plan of action, and then initiate action. It hasn't failed me yet, and you only get better at that at time with practice, because everything takes practice. But the more experiences you have to draw from, the more times you follow, you execute, then obviously the better you get at it, right? And so, that would be my that's how I kind of look at things. That would be my recommendation for folks that if they're looking to make a difference in whatever they're doing, whether it's military, out of military, it doesn't matter. I think action trumps analysis 9 times out of 10. And then, I'm sorry, can you repeat the second question?
What message would you like to share with our listeners? I think you touched upon that, but what message would you like to share with our listeners as they navigate their own paths, both within and beyond the military, or wherever they may be on their journey?
Absolutely. Just do it. I'll rip off Phil Knight there. Just go do it. Whatever it is, give it a shot, and you may fail. That's fine. Look at Roosevelt's man in the arena speech. It holds true today as it did the day he wrote it, and that is just get out there. And sure, people will say things to you, say things about you. That's fine. But at the end of the day, none of those people are going to be there at the end. It's going to be you. It's going to be your family. And, you don't want to look back on regret. And that's kind of, as the older I've gotten, I've really taken hold of that, and am trying to embody that, try to pass that on to my kids, and demonstrate that for them in their day-to-day lives. So get out there and figure out what you want to do and go do it. And you can always change. If you don't like it, go do something else. And then just figure out what makes you happy, and what brings that fulfillment, and then go execute.
It sounds like you're going to stay in progress. Just stay in motion. Just going back to what the NCO said, just do something, whatever that may be, because it'll reinforce those experiences. To tie into what you said, those experiences will help you get more proficient. So when those uncharted territory experiences do present themselves, you're a little more equipped to manage it. So that's great. Wow, I really appreciate this. This is a great conversation. I know we kind of talked before we hit the record button. We were just getting caught up on some things, but what is there anything else you'd like to share? Any other topics or discussions you like to see covered in future episodes to further enhance the impact of Acknowledge to Action? Or if there's any other parting advice that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, for my military brothers and sisters out there, I think our recruiting woes or struggles are widely reported, right? And some of it is very well deserved. But one of the reasons that when you and I first connected and talked about doing this podcast and some other things, it's hey, why would you do something like this? Because obviously I have very much a day job. I'm not retiring and gunning for X number of positions, but really I want to attempt to be a point of reference for somebody potentially, that to talk about some of the good things within the military, because there are a lot. I've gotten far more out of it than I've taken, and it's made me into the man that I am today. And it's been great for myself and my family. And I understand that everybody has their own experience, right? But and that's not. It's certainly not to say it's all been rainbows and sunshine, because it's not. Obviously, there are certain things that we all deal with. There are downsides to every job, and so I definitely don't want to sell it as something that's easy, but it is something that's worthwhile, in my opinion, and it's something that's been very, very good for me and those that I've been able to serve with, and my family. Despite being gone, I've been gone for years of my children's lives, which sounds, it's not something that I wear with a point of pride as something that I would design to do, but I think it set them up from the very beginning of knowing that there are things out there that are worth sacrificing for. And, they have sacrificed just as much as I have, and my wife, certainly, over the years. And so, I would just encourage folks to check it out. It may not be right for you, and that's fine. But get out there and at least know what you're saying no to before you say no. So that'd be my parting advice to anybody. And, people feel free to reach out to me. I've had a few people do that, and I've had some great conversation with people, whether it's joining the military, coming in special forces, whatever it is. I'm generally, as long as I've got the time, I'm always willing to talk with folks. And luckily now I've got an hour commute, so I've got plenty of time to have some of those phone calls. But it's I would say at least look at it and give it a shot if you're curious about it. And importantly, Matthew, I appreciate you reaching out and enjoy our conversation today as well. So I thank you.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Lucas, I appreciate that, and I value this time and our exchange here, because this is an incredibly impactful, meaningful conversation. It means a heck of a lot to me, and I know it means a lot, to our growing audience as well. So I appreciate that. And speaking of a growing list, our playlist. What song do you want to dedicate to the Acknowledge to Action playlist that's accessible on Spotify and eventually thinking Apple Music here?
Well, I thought about that. I thought it was a good question when we talked before, and for me, my career has been defined as just giving it a shot, as we talked about, and just working hard. And so I chose Tyler Childers' "Nose on the Grindstone," which is just keep working at it and just keep going. You may fail, but just keep working, and you'll get there eventually. So
that's a great song. I admittedly I haven't heard it until you told me that, and I listened to the it was on YouTube somewhere. The acoustic, what great song! I look forward to listening to it some more and all that. So, Dave, Lieutenant Colonel Lucas, I really appreciate this. I know this is gonna reach out to a lot of our listeners and give them just some tools in their toolbox that they could use to wherever they're at on their journey. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your journey. And I look forward to staying connected with you. You're always welcome. As the podcast grows, so does the episodes and the features, and there's a lot of options, whether you're a guest host or whatever. So I always want to extend that invite out to you, sir.
Well, I really appreciate it, and it's been a pleasure, and look forward to staying connected in the future as well. So, thanks a lot, Matt.
I appreciate it, Dave.
This concludes episode 5. Wow, what an amazing conversation. I am so incredibly thankful for this opportunity to connect with Dave. I have to admit, this was the first interview I had that was a direct result of networking through LinkedIn. Lieutenant Colonel Lucas and I exchanged a few messages along with a phone conversation prior to this podcast recording to establish a rapport. But more importantly, or shall I say tactfully and strategically, for Lieutenant Colonel Lucas to conduct a quality integrity check on me and the mission of Acknowledge to Action. For those listening to audio only, smiley face and relief inserted here. I can't emphasize enough how appreciative I am for Dave's time and for him trusting me and the Acknowledge to Action podcast. Once again, a big thank you to Lieutenant Colonel Lucas for sharing his journey with us. I eagerly anticipate staying connected and engaged with you through the Acknowledge to Action podcast and beyond. And as always, remember to embrace the journey. With Acknowledge to Action, wherever you are on your journey, you are not alone. Until next time.